This episode of the Codpast has been brought to you by ATEC, the Assistive Technology Exhibition and Conference. To find out more, go to www.atechconference.com. And Grammarly. Grammarly makes sure everything you type is easy to read, effective and mistake-free. To sign up for free or to get 20% off premium upgrades, go to www.grammarly.com/the Codpast.
The Codpast.
Hello and welcome to the Codpast. I'm your host Sean Douglas, and this is the place where you'll hear right brain stories from interesting individuals. Today's guest is an award-winning New York and Sunday Times best-selling author, has published over 30 books, and is a bit of a self-confessed Poldarling. Today's guest is Rowen Colman. Welcome to the show, Rowen.
Hello.
When I started a podcast that was going to interview people with dyslexia, the last thing that I thought was a large majority of my guests seemed to be authors or people that write for a living.
People are initially surprised that there are a lot of dyslexic who work with words, but dyslexic people are really creative, so it's not that surprising that many turn up being authors or writing fiction or making films.
And you've been an author for about 15 years now.
I have.
And kind of on and off for the last 10 years, you've been involved in a really cool series of books called Quick Reads.
Yeah, the Quick Reads are brilliant. They are a series of short novels for people who are emerging readers, adults who are emerging readers, I should say. And they're written by best-selling authors, and they cover all the genres: crime, romance, comedy, business books, self-help books. And really, they're designed for people who, for one reason or another, aren't comfortable with reading. Instead of having to read a kid's book or a teen book, you can pick up something that's going to be really interesting and suit you.
And when I first heard about them, I wasn't quite sure of the concept, because I initially thought that they were famous books by famous authors that had been condensed into these small books, but they're actually bespoke stories. The only place you can find them is within the Quick Read series.
Yeah, that's right. So it's all best-selling authors that you've heard of, and they write something specially for Quick Reads. So, for example, I wrote one this time called Looking for Captain Poldarling, about intense Poldarling fans, because I am an intense Poldarling fan, but it's not. I spoke to one person who said, "Oh, what was it like to abbreviate and condense the Poldarling books?" And I had to say, no, I haven't done that. That's not what I've done.
And there's certain things that make them kind of great for people that are reluctant readers. So they're all under 100 pages. There's generally not too many characters. Is there anything else that makes them really great books for people that are getting into reading?
I think the great thing about them is that they're very pacey. Whatever genre you pick up, they're quick paced, short paragraphs, simple language, and short chapters. And as a dyslexic reader myself, particularly when I was first trying to come to terms with dyslexia, I would just miss out big chunks of words because it just was too hard. And subsequently, I've read a lot of books very differently to other people. But the good thing about the Quick Reads is that there isn't any of that. It's very short and snappy and just really easy to engage with.
And they bring out 6 books every year. This year you've been featured. Your book is called Looking for Captain Poldarling. Can you tell me about what your gang or team of Poldarlings, is it Poldarlings? Poldarlings, what they get up to?
Well, they are a group of people who meet through a fan forum online, and they're all very passionate super fans, and they decide they love Poldarling so much they decide to try and go to Cornwall to meet Aidan Turner, and they arrange this road trip, and it's going to be a very long road trip because the main character doesn't like driving on motorways or A roads, so they have to go on little tiny B roads, and obviously it's about how people present themselves online and what they're like in real life, and there are a few surprises and shocks along the way. But at the end I won't tell you what happens at the end, that would ruin it. But it is mainly a book about friendship and pushing your comfort zone, I think.
And it's quite interesting. I mean, do you have to write in a very different way for these kind of books? Because I was reading your book earlier this week, and I was just about to go into an appointment, and then I got to the bit where what's his name, Ray and Lisa were in the caravan park, and he's just about to tell her something, and I was like, I can't leave until I find out what he needs to tell her. And up until that point, the book had touched on kind of gender identity and mental illness and all of these other themes, and that was only page 47. So how do you manage to fit all of that story into such a small space?
It's a different discipline to write a short novel, definitely, and it's a good one. I really enjoy trying to craft story into making it full and interesting in a short space of time. But I don't really write the novellas or short stories any differently, or quick reads specifically, any differently than I write my other fiction, because that's not my style. So I try to write accessible fiction and accessible language, because that's what I like to read. I think that's what my readers like as well. So it wasn't that I approached the writing differently. It's just that I had to do it in less words.
But I mean, even the characters, they develop quite quickly, and they're quite complicated characters as well.
Yeah. I think that is, thank you for saying that. I think that is just practice. It's just having written a lot of books in over a 15-year period that I've gotten fairly good at it now, I like to think.
And how do you come up with these ideas? Because I've only spoken to you once before, but I do see a little bit of you in the main character, Lisa.
Yeah. Well spotted. Well, actually, Lisa is a very anxious person. And when I was writing the quick read, I wanted to write about anxiety. It's something that I've had for a few years. And so I did put that into Lisa, put that little bit of me into her, and try to develop it through the experiences that she's had. And occasionally I do put a little bit of myself into the characters, but mostly they are just made up.
I mean, were they based on anyone? So Ray and what were the other characters? Abby, who's fantastic.
Yeah, Abby's my favourite.
And Kirsty.
No, they're not based. No, they're not. They kind of come to me. I think I started with Lisa, and then I thought about the kinds of people that I wanted to put in the car with Lisa, and the sort of people that I think would challenge her the most. And I wanted her to be challenged in lots of different ways, and to be brave in lots of different ways. And I think they all bring to her a different way of kind of experiencing the world and experiencing people. And I really wanted Abby as a character because I have a few friends who live with mental illness, and I think it can be really hard for people to relate to you if they know that you have a mental illness, and for some reason they think you're, I don't know, less human in a way. And I really wanted to try and just very briefly, let's be honest, in that short book, just show that that's not the case, and that whatever kind of, if you have any kind of mental illness, and there are many, you're still a human being, and you still deserve the same respect and care and attention that anybody else does.
And you've been in the publishing world. You've had a really long career, which is not the norm for a lot of people. 15 years in publishing. I mean, what do you think it is about you and your writing that has allowed you to have such a long career?
I think it is partly determination, partly brilliance, partly I think it's really important in any creative industry to keep doing your best work, whether people are looking or not. And I think what I've learned over 15 years is that there are always peaks and troughs, and sometimes your work will get less attention, and sometimes it will get more. But if you keep on doing your best work when people are paying attention, then you'll be ready.
Do you still have issues with dyslexia now?
Yeah, every day. My absolute personal worst thing is any kind of forms or booking things on the internet. I'm just dreadful. I just always get it wrong. I've tried to book train tickets this week to Bath, and I've now done it 4 times, and it's cost me about £200 because I keep booking the wrong thing. And it's a nightmare. So there's that. I hate filling in forms because I never get it right. or reading emails. I often read emails wrong and addresses wrong. And like, for example, today turned up at the wrong address on half an hour away. It's not this
Admittedly, the name of the road is the same.
The name of the road is the same, but
and the bus goes to both of them.
A little bit more care and attention, and I probably would have come to the right place. So I often get my husband to read my emails for me, because I will read them and think that they mean something, and I'll go, oh, no, look, read this, it's terrible. And he'll read it and go, no, that's not what it says at all.
Yeah.
You idiot. Every day there's something that frustrates me about it. But on the other hand, I think it's got so many upsides, and so much that I love about it that I wouldn't want it to be any other way. I don't think I'd be me if I wasn't dyslexic.
Do you think there's a coping strategy that you developed when you were younger that you can see that you still use now, or you saw the beginnings of that and have maybe perfected that now?
I definitely think when I was at school, I had a lot of resources, not school resources, sadly, a lot of internal resources on how to get around problems, how to deal with, not being able to really do my homework. I mean, I used to trade drawings for written work when I was in middle school. And while that was not, really the right way for any child to cope with dyslexia at school, it was a good way of teaching me to look for other avenues and to find my way around problems and to think laterally. And I think dyslexics are really good at thinking laterally, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about dyslexia. I enjoy a lot about dyslexia, actually, apart from having to fill in forms on the internet and getting lost on buses.
I mean, can you name anything? So things where you've thought laterally around problems recently, or you do regularly within your work?
Oh gosh, now I'm not going to be able to think of anything, and I know I thought of something before. Let me think. Okay. So my new novel is about time travel, and time travel isn't really possible at the moment, but I really have always wanted to write a time travel novel. So I thought a lot about how I could do that and make it seem possible, make it seem realistic. And because of that, I worked out that instead of making my character travel through time, I would make time travel through my character. And I think that's kind of worked pretty well for that book, it seems. It's getting quite a lot of nice feedback at the moment. And also it meant that I read lots of books about physics and particle physics and quantum physics, which I understood about 3% of. But I'm really proud because now I feel 3% more clever.
And now a word from our sponsors. ATEC, the Assistive Technology Exhibition and Conference, comes to London on the 6th of June 2017. ATEC is the one-day event where disability professionals in post-16 education and the workplace can join a host of expert keynote speakers and over 25 exhibitors and solutions providers. You can also get practical CPD training at one of the many scheduled seminars. For more information or to book your ticket, go to www.atecconference.com. And now, back to the show.
I think there is still some surprise when you say you write for a living as dyslexic, but I think our focus on what writing is a little bit skewed, because there's kind of three things going on when you write. There's absorbing things around you, absorbing things that you've read and that you feel yourself, creating a narrative around that and connecting all of the dots, and then thinking of a way to use words to convey that in the most compelling way to your audience. And then you've got the bit where you've got to put it on paper, which, if you think about it, is probably the least important part of that. But pretty much everywhere, the way we are assessed about what we are capable of or what we can conceive is about putting it on that piece of paper.
You're right, it is about the mechanics. And I get very distressed when I go to schools, which I do quite a lot, and work with kids, and the way that they're taught, and the way they're taught to use language, and the way they're taught the rules is often very off-putting and very frightening, particularly if you're dyslexic, and has nothing to do with what language is actually about. And language is for communicating. It's for, particularly in our culture from the earliest times, it's for storytelling. And that's what dyslexic people are really, really good at. It's our special talent. It's like a superpower, because we can see everything in a very creative visual way, and we are very good at sensing the rhythm and the pacing of a story and understanding people in a different way than non-dyslexic, those poor non-dyslexic people. And so it's the thing that we're most good at. And I think actually that in creative industries, and particularly in the publishing industry, not being able to spell or know where commas go, or getting a sentence a bit muddled up, is not going to stop you from doing what you want to do, because there are loads of people in that industry who know exactly where commas go. It's really all about just being able to have the confidence to express your ideas and to get your ideas out somehow onto the page. All of my first drafts are all, full of those red and green wiggly lines that you get in Word, and I just don't really care about that. I go back when I've done it and sort of try and take out as many as I can, but I know that at the end of the day, it's the heart of the story is the thing, and not the grammar or punctuation.
And then you have editors as well.
And then I have editors.
What's that relationship like? Because I always think, well, you just hand it over to an editor and they correct it. But is it more than that? Is it more of a partnership?
It is definitely a partnership, yeah. So, I work really hard on what I'm particularly writing at any given point, and I try not to give it to an editor until I think it's really good, as best as I can do. And then I give it to my editor, and bless my editors who have always been so kind to me. They will put all the commas in and the full stops and what have you, and try and sort out my muddled up sentences. And then they have ideas as well, and they look at the big picture of it. Because when you've been writing a book, especially a full-length novel, it can take over a year, and you're very, very close to it. So it's good to have somebody else step back and look at the big picture and point out things that you might have missed, or that in your head but you haven't managed to put on the page. And that's really how it works. And it's a really fun process. I enjoy it.
And you talked about having confidence in your own creativity, and that being a good way to get into the publishing industry. But as I said before, at school we're assessed on what's on the paper. What was school like for you?
School for me was not good academically. I can't say that I didn't enjoy school. I did quite enjoy it because I had really good coping mechanisms. But I had very low self-esteem, very low academic aspirations, always in the bottom sets, which they used to call remedial sets in those days, sort of like special classes. And it did knock my confidence, or I just wasn't very confident because I didn't expect a lot for my future. And ironically wrote poems about it. And it wasn't really until I was about 15, I had one teacher who saw that what was going on upstairs was different from what was being expressed on the page, and took an interest in me, and made a big difference actually to my life going forward, because I ended up with 4 GCSEs, and then I managed to be able to go do some A-levels, and then I got 1 good grade at A-level, and then I ended up at university. And it was there at university that I was finally assessed for dyslexia and diagnosed. That just made the world of difference to me, to know what it was, that it wasn't that I was lazy or stupid or careless, which I was told all the time through my school career. It was dyslexia, and there was a way around it, and it's an ongoing process. I'm constantly still trying to improve, but at least knowing there's a reason, and it's not your fault.
And it's interesting, a lot of writers have had a similar experience in school, and I had the same thing, and you get kind of put down for all of the red marks that come back on your paper, but then there's one teacher that says, actually your content's really good. But for a lot of writers that I've met, it's happened once and then never been followed through, and then you get 20 years down the line, 15 years down the line, and you think, oh, actually there was something there. But we've always felt inside that we could be writers, or there was something we were trying to get out and we couldn't demonstrate it. And I watched a video that you made, and you seemed to make a metaphor that summed it up perfectly, was that you were kind of looking at a glass window and potentially you could see yourself there, the you that you wanted to be, but you couldn't get to it because of that invisible glass window in the way.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely like that. And I want to say, oh, but it's so much better now for kids at school, but it's just not, actually. And it's actually getting worse because funding is being cut in school all the time. We need to try and do more for the dyslexic young people out there, because there's, as you know yourself, it is so frustrating. You've got everything going for you up in your brain. It's all firing on all cylinders, thinking really fast, having loads of great ideas. But if you can't express that, and if you can't get anybody to help you to express that, it just results in frustration and anger, and that can lead down very, very wrong and difficult paths for people who don't deserve it.
Yeah, and I think school was quite confusing for you before you found that teacher that believed in you. You had a very interesting experience, which is kind of the opposite of most children, where you'd written a poem, because usually you write something and you've got all the ideas in your head and they say no, it's not very good because it's not spelt very well. But you had the opposite, where you'd written a poem and it was so good that they said no, you couldn't have written it because it's too good. You must have copied it.
They thought I must have copied it. Yeah, which was quite heartbreaking for me at the time, actually, because I put a lot into that poem, and I was very proud of it. And then they said, no, you can't have written this. You must have copied it. But luckily, in the end, because it was really badly spelt and not very well punctuated, they did, and they couldn't find it anywhere else. I mean, this is the days, it was before the internet, so they couldn't Google it, but they couldn't find it anywhere else. So they let me enter it into the competition, and it did win.
Fantastic. So, I mean, what happened after that? So you had this teacher that believed in you. You got to college and university full of confidence, and I'm assuming you just went then, started writing books and got a deal.
Oh God, no. No, it took me a really long time to have the confidence to try and write fiction.
Why did you still not have the confidence? Because you'd come so far and proved so much to yourself by that point.
I think it just takes a lot of guts, and I just didn't have the guts when I was in my early 20s. I think I had come a really, really long way, and I'd overcome a lot of things, and I'd started the journey on overcoming dyslexia or living with it rather, and that was a lot to take in. So I was 29 when I entered a short story competition in Company magazine, and I was in my lunch hour. I saw the competition and I thought, I'm going to enter it, because the reason I decided to enter it was because it was for young writers, and when you're 30 you're not a young writer anymore. And I thought, oh my God, I'm nearly, I'm 29, I'm nearly 30, this is my last chance. I could die soon. So very quickly wrote a short story and whacked it in the post. And 6 weeks later, found out that it had won. And I was amazed, because it wasn't at all properly punctuated or spell checked, because I'd been far too nervous and excited to get someone else to read it for me. So it didn't win because it was nicely punctuated. It won because it was a good story. And that then pushed me on into getting the idea for my first novel down and finding an agent and a publishing deal. That was it, really. I gave up my job towards the end of writing my first novel. I had my daughter, and I gave up my proper job then, and I've been kind of winging it ever since, and that's 16 years ago now.
And I think a lot of people, and it's become a question that I quite like asking people, most people that I've met that are successful as dyslexics have started to become successful when they started doing things their own way. Do you remember that eureka moment with yourself when you realised, if I do things my way, I can be much more successful?
I think there's a certain amount. Yeah, I think so. I don't think I was aware of it. When I wrote my first novel, for example, I'd never read a book on how to write a novel. I'd never taken a course on how to write a novel. I just thought, I'm going to write a novel now. And which sounds a bit cocky, doesn't it? And I wasn't being cocky. I just being naive, I think. And I really just trusted my instincts. And I think it is your dyslexic instincts that kind of help you to follow your own creative path, and to not to try and emulate other people's paths, but to forge your own path. And I think that's always stood me in good stead with my writing. Although I haven't really consciously thought about it until in the last few years, when I'm often asked to go and teach other people how to, approach writing a novel or how to build characters, etc. And then it occurred to me then that really I never did that. I just kind of managed to find those resources or to trust my instincts myself, which is, I think, one of the plus sides of being dyslexic is that you have this huge creative resource, like a bottomless well of ideas and approaches that never seems to run dry, touch wood.
I mean, have you got any advice for anyone who's trying to find their own path? Because it can be quite daunting, because you are told this is the way you should do things. And there is a lot of trial and error in that as well, finding your sweet spot. Yeah. Is there any advice you have for anyone to do that? I think everybody that I've ever met who's kind of learning how to live with dyslexia and how to make it work for them are all, without exception, really resilient. And I think that's a characteristic that you can trade on to forge your path and to find the way that works for you. And that's what I really enjoy about dyslexic people, is that if it doesn't work the first time, don't stop trying, go back and try another way. And because you are dyslexic, you will find the way. That's one of the things that you're really, really good at. And you will find the path that's going to take you to doing what you want to do and to being really good at it. And once you've done that, once you've found that way, you're going to be so good at whatever it is that you want to do, and you're going to be better than everybody else, and it's going to be awesome. So my best advice is to keep showing up, keep trying, and don't give up. Do you ever kind of look at non-dyslexic people and see them struggle and think, if only you were dyslexic or thought in a dyslexic way, that would be so much easier for you?
Yeah. Yes. My husband isn't dyslexic, bless him. And he's just rubbish at problem solving. He's just no good at it. But luckily he's got me. I think it's interesting to work with non-dyslexic writers, and the approach is very different. I think with non-dyslexic writers, it's often much more analytical and kind of structural, and building up a story in a kind of sort of brick by brick. Whereas I think for me, and another dyslexic writer described this to me a few years ago, when I start to write a story, it's a bit like a free fall, like jumping out of an aeroplane without a parachute and seeing what happens. And I really love that part of writing, just splurging all the words out and hoping that you sort of work out how to fly before you hit the floor. And what is your new book about? Well, funny you should ask. It's about a woman who has to go back, a British woman who goes back to Brooklyn to settle her mother's estate. And while she's there, her mother grew up in Brooklyn, and she discovers that she has the ability to walk through time to the time when her mum was 20 years old. And so she goes back and meets her mother as a young woman. And in 1977, so it's very, disco is big. The son of Sam is stalking the streets. There's a heat wave. The mafia are controlling everything, and it all works up. It's working its way up to the New York blackout of July 1977. But she realizes that she can alter the course of her mother's life in a way that will save her mother in the future. If she does that, she sacrifices her own life. And it's the decisions that she has to make and the sacrifices that she has to make in order to decide what the right thing is to do. And also there is some epic disco.
Nice. Are you going to bring out a soundtrack or a Spotify soundtrack? I am
so going to do a soundtrack. I had the best time listening to disco. I love disco. I loved it so much.
So if people want to get hold of your books or see you, are you doing any book signings or events or anything like that in the near future? I'm at the Bradford Literary Festival in July. I think it's about the middle of July.
And if you want to keep up with where I am and what I'm doing, then keep checking Twitter, because that's mostly where I put all my stuff. And books available in all good bookshops.
And your new book's coming out in
June 29th.
Brilliant. Rowen, it's been a pleasure.
My pleasure too, thank you.
The Codpast is an audio production from extraordinaire.tv.
And that was this month's dose of Dyslexic Radio Heaven. So once again, we'd like to make you aware of our awesome Grammarly offer. To sign up for free or to get 20% off premium accounts, go to www.grammarly.com/the Codpast. Now, if you're someone who struggles with spelling, grammar, punctuation, and generally getting your thoughts onto the page, then Grammarly is something that you might want to take a look at. Grammarly is more than just a spell checker. It can help enhance clarity and meaning, checks 250 grammar points, and can help widen your written vocabulary. To get 20% off premium accounts, go to www.grammarly.com/the Codpast. That's www.grammarly.com/the Codpast. If you like this episode of the Codpast, then make sure you subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud to make sure you never miss another show. Also, if you feel the Codpast brings some value to your life, then please think about making a donation. No matter how big or small, it's your donations that help keep the Codpast running. Finally, another way you can help the Codpast is by giving us a 5-star review on iTunes. We'd massively appreciate it, as it's these 5-star reviews that do help the show gain visibility. But for me, that's it for this month. So until next time, enlighten your right brain at thecodpast.org.